In 1917, aircraft engine manufacturer Rapp Motor Works became Bavarian Motor Works, or BMW, as part of a restructuring to fix their reputation. But the Treaty of Versailles restricted aircraft production after the end of the war, forcing the company to move into other areas of production. In 1919, they started producing a 500cc flat twin that would find favor with several motorcycle manufacturers, including Victoria and BMW, a more successful competitor that would take over their engine development and name with a merger in 1922, meaning the BMW Helios motorcycle would become the BMW R32, putting production focus for the company on motorcycles. In 1928, they took over the Dixie Car Company, which was manufacturing a version of the Austin 7 under license, badged as the Dixie 315. Soon, the Dixie name was dropped in favor of BMW, and the car would be completely revised for 1932 as the 320, bigger at 126 inches long on an 85-inch wheelbase, weighing 1,400 pounds. And the engine saw several upgrades, including an increase to nearly 800 cc's and a change to overhead valves. It was replaced less than 2 years later by the bigger 303, 154 inches long on a 95-inch wheelbase, and 1,800 pounds, powered by a 1,200cc inline 6 with 30 horsepower. And it would evolve into the 315, 319, and 329 as the engine grew in size, up to a 46 horsepower 1.9 liter by 1937. For 1936, they introduced their first four-door sedan with the new 326, a car that was 180 inches long on a 113-inch wheelbase and 2,400 pounds, powered by a 50 horsepower 2-liter version of the straight six, an engine that would spread to the smaller 327 touring car and even smaller 328 sports car. And the compact 329 would evolve into the 320 and then 321, also using the 2-liter engine. They were joined in 1939 by the more upmarket 335, 191 inches long on a 117-inch wheelbase, and using a 3.5-liter with a claimed 90 horsepower. Models would mostly carry over after the war, with the 326 restyled as the 340 for 1949, a car that would soon become the East German EMW, while BMW itself attempted to restructure, having lost many of its assets with the bombing during the war and the communist occupation of East Germany afterwards, leading to the all-new 501. It was 186 inches long on a 112-inch wheelbase and 3,000 pounds, initially using the 2-liter engine, eventually getting a bigger 2.1-liter 6 and then an 100-horsepower 2.6-liter V8 in the better-equipped 502, before growing to a 3.2-liter, as model names continued to change. That was an engine that would find its way into the 503 Grand Touring and 507 sports car, although only a few hundred of each would be built. Around the same time, BMW started building a version of the ISO Isetta under license, re-engineered and initially using their own 250cc 4-stroke single, soon seeing even more modifications, including being stretched into a 4-seat version with a bigger engine, and named for its 600cc displacement. By this point, BMW had been struggling with slow sales and small profits for some time, but an influx of cash by investors allowed the development of the 700 for 1960, based on the rear-engine 600, but using monocoque construction and a bigger flat twin. BMW would sell nearly 190,000 of them before the end of 1965. This success allowed the creation of the new class compact executive cars introduced in 1962, 177 to 178 inches long on a 100-inch wheelbase, and sold as the 1500, 1600, 1800, and 2000, or as the 2000C or CS coupes starting in 1965, replacing the dated 3200 CS that had also been introduced in 1962. For 1966, the 700 was replaced by what was essentially a downsized version of the new class car, sometimes referred to as the O2 cars, 166 inches long on a 98-inch wheelbase, and initially offered as the 1602, although badged simply as the 1600 when the bigger car with the same engine was dropped. The new class coupes were effectively replaced in 1968 by a new line of CS coupes, They were 184 inches long on a 103-inch wheelbase, and initially sold as the 2800 CS, and later as the 2.5-liter and 3-liter CS. The end of the decade would see a 2-liter version of the '02 Series 1600 as the 2002, offered as a 99 horsepower base version, an 118 horsepower dual carb TI, and later as an 128 net horsepower fuel-injected TII, a low 16-second car capable of more than 115 miles an hour. And an 168 horsepower turbocharged version was added in 1973. The new class was replaced by the 5 Series in 1972, the first to use the new naming structure. Initially 182 inches long on a 104-inch wheelbase and 2,700 to 2,500 pounds, carrying over the 2-liter engine. It would be followed a few years later by the compact 3 Series to replace the so-called '02 cars. 172 inches long, or 178 inches long in the U.S. with the bigger bumpers, on an 101-inch wheelbase and 2,300 to 2,600 pounds. Early versions included the 316, 318, and 324-cylinder versions, with 89 to 123 horsepower. But soon, 6-cylinder versions would also be offered. 1976 would see a new touring coupe as the 6 Series, a bigger car that was 187 to 194 inches long on an 104-inch wheelbase and 3,200 to 3,600 pounds, initially with a 2.8 or 3-liter straight 6 with 182 to 196 horsepower, a high 15-second car capable of speeds near 135 miles an hour. Then in 1977, they returned to the big car market with the 7 Series, a car that was 191 to 197 inches long on an 110-inch wheelbase and 3,200 to 3,600 pounds, sharing its engines with the 6 Series. And then BMW's new motorsports division introduced their first product in the form of the rare M1 mid-engine sports car, 172 inches long on a 102-inch wheelbase and under 2,900 pounds. It used a 3.5-liter straight 6, good for 173 horsepower, a 13-second quarter mile, and speeds near 165 miles an hour. Next would be the M6, or M635 CSI, depending on the market. Essentially just a 6 Series coupe with a 256 to 282 horsepower version of the 3.5-liter, again depending on the market. In top form, it was good for a 14-second quarter mile and more than 155 miles an hour. The M5 of 1984 was based on the second-generation 5 Series introduced in 1981. It was slightly bigger than the earlier car at 182 to 189 inches long on a 103-inch wheelbase and 3,100 pounds, with the M5 version sharing its engine with the M6. It would be followed in 1986 by the M3, based on the second-generation 3 Series that arrived in 1982. As such, it was 171 inches long on a 101-inch wheelbase and 2,700 pounds, but with many unique features, including its brake system and dual overhead cam 192 to 197 horsepower 2.3-liter 4. Around the same time, BMW also introduced their first V12 in the new second-generation 7 Series, a 5-liter engine producing 296 horsepower in a car that was 193 inches long on a 112-inch wheelbase and weighing roughly 4,000 pounds. For 1990, the 6 Series would be discontinued and replaced by the more upmarket 8 Series. It was 188 inches long on a 106-inch wheelbase and weighed 4,100 to 4,400 pounds, initially with a 4-liter V8 or 5-liter V12. Around the same time, they would produce a limited run of 8,000 Z1 plastic-bodied roadsters that used unusual retractable doors. Only 154 inches long on a 96-inch wheelbase and weighing 2,800 pounds, it used a 2.5-liter straight 6 providing 168 horsepower. In 1994, BMW would purchase the Rover Group and then sell off all the brands but Mini. 1996 would see the introduction of a regular production roadster with the Z3, based on the third-generation 3 Series. It was 159 inches long on a 96-inch wheelbase and 2,600 pounds, initially with a 1.8 or 1.9-liter inline-4 with 114 to 138 horsepower. And for 1998, there would be a coupe version and available 6-cylinder engines, with up to 321 horsepower in the M version. There would also be a new Z8 Roadster about the same time, a car that was 173 inches long and a 99-inch wheelbase, weighing 3,500 pounds. It used a 4.9-liter V8 for 395 horsepower, making for a mid-12-second quarter mile and a top speed near 170 miles an hour. Perhaps as a sign of things to come, 1999 would see the end of the 8 Series Coupe and the introduction of the X5 SUV. It would also be around this time that BMW would purchase the rights to the Rolls-Royce brand and would soon start producing cars under that name. And they would introduce an all-new Mini, putting an end to the design that had been in production since 1959. The 6 Series would be revived in 2003 as a coupe and convertible. It was 190 inches long and a 109-inch wheelbase and 3,600 pounds, initially with either a 255 horsepower 3-liter straight 6 or a 329 horsepower 4.4-liter V8 for 175 miles an hour and a low 13-second quarter mile. The Z8 was discontinued, and the Z3 would be replaced by the Z4, which was 161 inches long on a 98-inch wheelbase and launched with a 2.2, 2.5, or 3-liter 6 for 168 to 228 horsepower, while the SUV market was expanded with the compact X3 based on the X-Drive 4-wheel drive 3 Series. It was 180 inches long on a 110-inch wheelbase and 3,800 to 4,100 pounds, and engines initially included a 2.5-liter 4 or 3-liter 6 petrol or 3-liter diesel for 189 to 228 horsepower. But by this point, the 3 Series was starting to outgrow its audience, if not in size, in price, at 176 inches long on a 107-inch wheelbase and 3,200 to 3,600 pounds. So for 2004, a smaller 1 Series was introduced, only 166 to 172 inches long on a 105-inch wheelbase and 2,700 to 3,400 pounds, initially with an 114 horsepower 1.6-liter or 148 horsepower 2-liter. The SUV offerings would continue to grow with the X6 of 2008, essentially a hatchback variant of the X5, marketed as a 5-door activity coupe, and followed by the X1 of 2009, as the name suggests, a small SUV based on the 1 Series, weighing 500 pounds more and being 175 inches long on a 109-inch wheelbase. For 2010, they would introduce their active hybrid system on the 750, adding a 20 horsepower or 15 kilowatt electric motor, a system that would soon move to other models. The M treatment would be applied to the 1 Series for 2012, using a 3-liter turbo 6 with 335 horsepower for a high 12-second quarter mile and speeds near 170. And the 6 Series would get a 5-door version called the Grand Coupe. For 2013, the 2-door versions of the 3 Series were spun off as a separate 4 Series, but would also include a new Grand Coupe 4-door version. At this point, they were 183 inches long on a 111-inch wheelbase and 3,200 to 4,100 pounds, initially offered with a 2 or 3-liter turbo for 241 to 302 horsepower, or in the M4, a 3-liter twin turbo with 425 horsepower for a quarter mile under 12 seconds and a top speed over 180. The same general concept was applied to the 1 Series the following year to create the 2 Series. 175 inches long on a 106-inch wheelbase and weighing 3,000 to 3,700 pounds, initially with a 2-liter turbo with 181 to 241 horsepower, or in the M235, a 322 horsepower 3-liter 6, taking just over 13 seconds to do the quarter mile and exceeding 165 miles an hour. There was also a move into the electric car market with the i3, only 157 inches long on a 101-inch wheelbase and 2,600 pounds, initially with an 18-kilowatt motor. A gas range extender was optional, and it was one of the more successful early entries in the growing electric car market. There was also an i8 plug-in hybrid sports car. It was 185 inches long on a 110-inch wheelbase and 3,400 pounds, using a 1.5-liter turbo inline 3 mated to a 68-kilowatt electric motor for a combined 369 horsepower, making it a high 12-second car with a top speed near 185. 2015 would see the introduction of the X4, the Activity Coupe version of the X3. Then 2018 would add the X2 Activity Coupe based on the X1. It was then followed by the X7 full-size SUV, 204 inches long on a 122-inch wheelbase, and 5,100 to 5,400 pounds, initially using a 335 horsepower 3-liter straight six. The 8 Series would return in 2018, effectively replacing the 6 Series, and offered in coupe, convertible, and 4-door sedan, again marketed as a Grand Coupe. 2-door versions are 191 inches long on a 111-inch wheelbase, while the 4-door is 200 inches long on a 119-inch wheelbase. Engines were initially a turbocharged 3-liter gas or diesel straight six with 235 horsepower, or a twin-turbo 4.4-liter V8 with 523 horsepower, with the M8 soon to follow, offered in 591 to 617 horsepower versions. 2020 would see the end of the i8 and the introduction of the iX electric versions of their SUVs, starting with the iX3, followed by the iX1 and iX2. But instead of making an iX5, they created the distinct iX with no number, although similarly sized at 195 inches long on a 118-inch wheelbase and weighing 5,400 to 5,900 pounds, with a scalable electric drivetrain. A concept that started to carry into their cars in 2022, when the i3 was replaced by the i4, an electric car based on the 4 Series Grand Coupe 5-door hatchback. For 2023, BMW added the XM full-sized plug-in hybrid crossover at 201 inches long on a 122-inch wheelbase, weighing just over 3 tons, initially using a 4.4-liter twin-turbo V8 combined with an electric motor for 644 horsepower. Unlike many other brands, BMW continues to offer a full line of vehicles and is currently the global sales leader in the luxury car market, having remained the benchmark for the compact performance luxury car for roughly 60 years. So as always, thanks for watching. Don't forget to comment below and like and subscribe.